Welcome to the Intrinsically Ordered podcast. Today I am joined by an independent Catholic priest with the White Robe Monks of St. Benedict. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'd love to hop just right into your background on how you came to be in an independent Catholic movement, or we could even start with, tell me what an independent Catholic movement is, and then we'll dive into your story here.
That's a wonderful question. There was this very interesting podcast called Sacramental Wine, wine like somebody who whines. And the guy who ran that podcast, who's a bishop in the independent sacramental movement, as we call it, he always said that we had to have like a elevator speech ready, when somebody asks us this question. So if I can answer it shortly, it's basically anyone who consider themselves to be Catholic and, who especially put emphasis on the sacraments, but they are not part of the official Anglican, Catholic, or Orthodox churches. So we are basically independent from any of those churches, and we normally have our own bishops. And,
That's awesome.
It also varies quite a lot, so you get groups that are very liberal, and then you also get groups that are more trad cath than the group that you probably belong to.
Yeah. And what was kind of your religious background growing up? And then how did you find out about this independent movement?
Well, so I have quite an interesting history. I'm from South Africa, and especially in the Afrikaans culture, well, especially at the time that I grew up, it was dominated by the Dutch Reformed Church. So as a baby, I was baptized in that church. And then when I was about 9 or 10, my parents converted to a very fundamentalist Pentecostal church. And this is the church that I grew up in. And, I had no exposure to what we call the sacramental churches, like the Orthodox, the Anglicans and Catholics. And it was only in my second year of studies that one of my lecturers introduced me to a person who would become a mutual friend, and he was actually a convert from one of the Dutch Reformed churches to the Russian Orthodox Church. And that started the process of me becoming more interested in these churches. And then when I finally broke ties or was kicked out of this church that I grew up in, I was confirmed as Anglican. And then for many years, I actually thought about becoming an Anglican priest. But unfortunately, in our country, if you are queer, you still have to be celibate. And they are still quite strict about it, because Desmond Tutu, the late Desmond Tutu, his daughter was an Anglican priest. And when she got married, they defrocked her. And that is when I basically started reading up about the independent sacramental churches. And I'll tell more a bit later about how I got involved in the specific group that I'm in now. But it was a long journey. It was about a journey of about 26 years before I was ordained in January this year. So it was a long and, journey that was quite a winding one, I explored other religions as well during this process, but I finally settled on the White Robe Monks of St. Benedict.
Did you ever have a moment where you were questioning being religious at all, or have you always kind of wanted to be in the spiritual realm?
Yes, I've definitely questioned it, and I think that even while studying theology, I went through a phase where I kind of thought, wow, especially when I read John Shelby Spong's books, and also in South Africa, there's a group called the New Reformation. And, a lot of those folks have moved away from religion altogether. And, I think people often accuse clergy of, not telling people about even the contradictions that you find in the Gospels, for example. And, you learn about all these things if you actually study theology properly. But for me, I think what kind of really anchored me and kept me as somebody who wanted to stay within spirituality was a few things that happened in my life that even, up until today, I cannot, in a rational way explain that away that for me was proof that there is something bigger than us, whatever you want to call that, if you want to call it the universe or God. And, my belief that we are all spiritual beings. And then, of course, you had somebody that you interviewed recently that spoke about the calling to ministry. If once you have that, it never, leaves you alone until you actually do something about that.
And what keeps you in Christianity? You mentioned that you kind of looked at other religions. What is it that you find beautiful or attractive or true inside of Christianity in general?
That is really a good question, now I'm talking about about 20 years ago, I was like exploring Wicca and, all kinds of weird and wacky, well, what people would consider in my country, that's very conservative as weird and wacky. And I think I also had a strong pull towards Buddhism. And that happened in a time in my life in 2013 where I was so sick, that I had shingles. And the doctor said, but people at your age, don't really get shingles unless there's, some kind of autoimmune thing going on. And then I was trying to plan this trip away. And even just planning this trip, was causing me so much stress. And then at the end of the day, I had this idea in my head that I had to Google, spiritual retreat. And then I heard about this place called Dharmagiri, and it's a Buddhist retreat center in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in the Drakensberg Mountains. It's so beautiful there. So it's a bit of a drive. And that really changed my life a lot, that peace and tranquility. It's only years later that I realized that really healed me. That really helped me. And for a long time, I easily would have become Buddhist because, it's not actually considered a religion by many people, more as a way of practice. So if I didn't choose to stay in Christianity, I easily would have become a Buddhist, And I think my Christianity is influenced by Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism. And I'll tell you more about that as well, because that also led me to the White Robe monks. And I think what really kept me there was I kept on coming back to the Eucharist and feeling that, if I had to move to another religion, I would have to abandon that. And I feel that there's something wonderful in there. And I feel that, for me, it's the center of my life, even before I became priest. And also the message of Jesus, which unfortunately I feel over the centuries, a lot of dogmatic layers was laid on top of it. And, we lost the real meaning behind his message. And funny enough, I also kind of came back to Mary, I think there's a bit of the divine feminine in her and people like Mary Magdalene. But yeah, there's just something that kind of anchored me, and I felt that, the calling is from Christ, and I want to follow his message, and I want to live out that calling, and I want to do something, even if it's something small, just to make the world a more compassionate place.
That's beautiful. And then diving into there's kind of this, you want to stay involved in the Eucharist, the spirituality. How big is kind of the independent Catholic world out there? Are there a lot of different orders? Is there kind of just a few?
I would say there are, from what I know, quite a few thousand of these jurisdictions, as we call them. Obviously, most of them are found in America, which is not a surprise. But basically from America, it's spread across the world. But to give you some background, that all started, I don't know if you know much about the old Catholic Church, but basically I think it was in the late 1700s, the Roman Catholic Church in the Netherlands broke away from Rome. And first the dispute was about their right to choose their own bishop that they've always had over the centuries. And when eventually this one guy who was appointed as the Bishop of Babylon consecrated to, the bishop that they chose, they were excommunicated, and Rome chose their own bishop. And then the last straw for them was, Vatican I, about the infallibility of the Pope. So then they basically went away and said, we are the old Catholics. We are the ones who have actually kept Catholicism as it was supposed to be. I would imagine the first frat cats, But funny enough, they didn't stick to the Latin Mass. They actually translated the Mass in the vernacular. Although, if you look at it, the one that they even follow today, it's the Tridentine Mass, but in the vernacular. And then from them, there were a lot of other people who were ordained as bishops and that could lay claim to the apostolic succession. But then they started to form their own churches, like the liberal Catholic Church. And, that is where many of the churches that we have today in the independent sacramental movement, originates from. But as the White Robe monks, we just say, we are not Old Catholic, we are not Roman Catholic, we are not Orthodox, we're just Catholic, Catholic with a small letter C.
That's beautiful. And how did you get involved with the White Robe monks? Tell us a little bit about the group and how you found out about them.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was in about 2019 when I started, reading up a bit more about the independent Catholic movement, and when I tried to find a church here. For a while I did consider the liberal Catholic Church because they have quite a long presence dating more than a century in this country. But unfortunately, they don't ordain women. So I felt that is, for me, a non-negotiable. And then I read this interesting article about a lady who was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest. I thought, can that really be, And then I was really intrigued about the women who ordained her. And then I read up about this group called the Roman Catholic Women Priests. And I said, okay, this lady, this bishop, Patricia, I really want to meet her because she was one of the first women that were ordained. So basically, I think it were two independent Catholic bishops and then a Roman Catholic bishop who ordained these women as priests and then eventually ordained them as bishops. And then they started ordaining other women. And I think there are about 150 of these women priests all over the world. And for a while, I kind of thought, okay, maybe, this is the group that, I might become ordained as. But then I saw this WhatsApp status update. Do you feel called to the priesthood? And I was like, wait a minute, but who is this guy? And then I remembered, but actually, I have actually spoken to him, but I think I might have mixed him up with somebody from the liberal Catholic Church. And then I remembered what I actually read up about the White Robe monks. I think it was a YouTube video about them doing weddings, especially weddings for people in the Roman Catholic Church, because there you cannot get married in other venues, but then also interfaith weddings, And for many years, I was part of this queer church in Johannesburg, and that's where I obtained my marriage license. So I've been conducting weddings since 2009. Same-sex marriages was legalized towards the end of 2006. Now, about 80% of the weddings that I conduct are for same-sex couples. And I would say about 99% of those are people who are not part of any organized religion. So then I thought, but wait a minute, I've already been living out this kind of ministry that they've been doing, for a long time. So that led me to their website. And then I discovered that they're also a jurisdiction, like a church, but they're also a religious order. So they have people who are clergy and monks, and you have people who are just clergy or just monks, and they then lay affiliates, and they are Benedictines, so they follow the rule of Saint Benedict. But it's an adapted rule. It's the Zen rule of Saint Benedict. So if you go through the whole process of, becoming a monk, you actually get a Zen name. And you have to make, before your final profession, this piece of cloth, that you wear around your neck, that's called a rakashu, and it's made from different pieces of cloth that you stitch together, and that you say all these prayers as you stitch it. And, being celibate is not a requirement. So I thought, wow, okay, this is the group that I need to look into. And when I saw them saying that, they are trying to make the world a more compassionate place, that they believe that Jesus never said no to anyone, and that they offer the sacraments to anyone who asks for it, I was like, okay, so. And then I reached out to the bishop, Oliver Felix. He said to me, well, you know what? The first thing that you need to do is come and attend the Mass. And during that time, I was actually dating this guy. And I dragged this poor guy to Mass with me, and we both just enjoyed it. And little did I know that, about 4 years later, that we would get married and that we would have get married in a nuptial Mass. I mean, that was never in the cards for me when I grew up.
How did you view your queerness in relation to religion over the course of your life?
That is something I really struggled with, especially when I studied theology. And, at the time in the Pentecostal church, we were a bunch of students living together in this house. And I was actually outed by the same lecturer who introduced me to the sacramental churches, outed me before I could even really understand that I was gay myself, because I was in such denial. In the Pentecostal churches, well, especially this one, they literally teach you that you shouldn't admit something, because once you admit something, it's out there. It's actually quite the new age if you think about it, like the power of the spoken word. You speak it into reality. So I was outed before I was actually quite ready to come out. And then I was basically given a choice, either basically repent or be kicked out of this house. I literally would have been out on the streets. And even at that time, my parents disowned me. So if it wasn't for a gay pastor who took me into his house, and one of my lecturers who, helped me, I probably would have been homeless at that time. And there was actually a time when I considered to commit suicide. There was this station wagon belonging to the church, or I think you guys called it an RV, and I actually wanted to gas myself in this, station wagon. And I didn't tell anyone about it, and I just wrote this letter, to God. And then one of the friends I had at that time, who was also in the Orthodox Church, he phoned me out of the blue. And the first words out of his mouth was, are you having suicidal thoughts? I nearly dropped the phone. And I was like, how does he know it? So it was this long story about how this lady is considered as a psychic, said to him, one of your close friends are going to commit suicide. He prayed about it, and then he felt like he had to contact me. And what is spooky is that she even mentioned and described the color of the station wagon. And my friend used to visit me a lot in this house, but he didn't even know about the station wagon. And then he just said to me, let's get out of here. And we went to this local dam, just sat there on the benches, and I just really unpacked and just started crying. And then this homeless person started to approach us. And first I was annoyed, it's like really disturbing this very private, intense moment, And the only thing he said to us, well, look at the ducks on this little pond, yeah. And, they put their heads under the water, they get food, but they don't drown. Doesn't God know what he's doing? Everything will be okay. And that was such a moment for me. And I felt, well, if God is really this God who's so anti-gay, and if everything that they say about these Globe passages are really true, and we are really destined for hell, wouldn't it have been more merciful for God to just allow me to kill myself? Why did God intervene in such a way? And obviously it still took a few years for me to really fully accept me, because the brainwashing and the anti-gay agenda, you really internalize it in a type of church that I grew up in. But that was really a step towards me accepting myself and just saying, well, I don't care what the church says. I don't care what the Bible says, It was written, over a period of centuries, and, it was written by fallible people who wrote it from the context of their time. I'm not going to allow that, to rule and dictate my life and to tell me that I'm less of a human being.
Well, I'm glad that, to go from such a dark spot to finding kind of a community, a place, a meaning for life, that's beautiful. And how do you view religion? Like in traditional Catholicism, people say that like religion is more true than science is true, or that it's objectively true, and that we are the only ones with the fullness of truth. How do you view religion? Is it as is it a social construct? Is it a community? Is it something that's true, or all religions trying to just participate in the same divine life? Like, how do you view the veracity, perhaps, of what religion is?
And that is, as part of my formation process in program with the White Robe monks, actually, even in your application process, you have to talk about your delusions, illusions, and illusions. So I try to look up the word book definitions, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what all of this means. I know what it means, but I also don't know what it means. And what's the difference between the three? So I say to the bishop, I really hope you don't mind, but can you please, just in simple terms, explain to me what that means? So delusions means false beliefs, illusions means false perceptions, and illusions means false stories. So as White Robe monks, we are constantly challenged in everything that we believe and everything that we do to look out for those three things. And we believe that beliefs are just that, beliefs. So for me, I don't believe that one religion has the fullness of truth. I think, it's like the old saying goes that, all religions, even lack of belief, people who don't have specific beliefs and don't believe in God or are not sure that there's a God. Ultimately, all of that for me is like different paths just leading to one mountain. It's just a different way of getting there. We cannot be sure about anything. And I think that is the sad part. People are so sure about the beliefs that they hold, and they are just beliefs, and that they actually kill one another about that, and that they are not even aware about their own delusions, illusions, and illusions, and that's very dangerous. If you're not even aware of that, and I think it's a very dangerous ground that you tread on once you say that only the Catholic religion has the fullness of truth. Yes, I do believe there's absolute beauty in there, and there's a lot in the sacraments especially. Now, I always say that I try to lead a sacramental lifestyle. And what I mean by that is I try to see God in everything and in everyone. And that is what the sacraments are all about for me. Channels through which we can experience God's grace and through which we can experience wholeness, healing, love, and compassion.
Oh, that's beautiful. What and it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of good work in the world, especially for communities that have historically felt apart from the church or persecuted by the church, and that you guys allow them to have that spirituality, that community that they were never allowed to belong to. What else do you think the White Robe monks are doing to make a difference in the world? What are some of those? It sounds like you guys are doing great work. Tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing and how you hope that your work's making the world a better place.
Before I became part of the White Robe monks of St. Benedict, I had a spiritual director, she's an Anglican priest. And this is the beautiful part, I was like really battling to get a church where I could be ordained. Because once you go to another church to say that you want to be ordained, or you want to use the church for ordination, doors just get shut down in your face. And then she said, well, I'll ask my bishop if we can use your church. Months went past. I thought, okay, that's not going to happen. The bishop said yes, and I was actually ordained in her church. So I'm digressing a bit, but she said to me that, what, Jesus didn't sit in a synagogue and waited for people to come to him. He went to where the people were. And I feel that is what the White Robe monks of St. Benedict do. We go to where people are, so we would have masses at people's houses. We would do weddings and funerals wherever, that needs to happen, baptisms, even the sacramentals, like going out and blessing somebody's house, if they feel that there's some dark energy there or something is not okay in the house, to bring that comfort, I wear my St. Benedict's medal all the time, blessing a medal or a cross and giving that to someone, and then in addition to that, the work that we try to do to feed the homeless, the hungry people and homeless people. So each priest is encouraged to have a chapel or a sacred space, on their property or in their house that they could use as a chapel, celebrate Mass and invite other people to celebrate Mass. So we have a priest in the town of Vredefort, Father Samuel, and he does a lot each Saturday at a soup kitchen that he has to try and feed the impoverished people of his community. And then recently in Johannesburg, the bishop started a similar initiative where we have a soup kitchen once a month for an old age home, and to also reach out, to the elderly. They are such a neglected community. And, people forget about old people. They just put them in this old age home. Nobody, goes to visit them. Yeah, so we are encouraged to try and find ways where we can be of ministry and service to people. Because for me, about being a priest is not about wearing, nice vestments. It's not about having a title and getting people to call you father and to be on this pedestal, but it's actually to be of service to people and to serve people, because that's what Christ did. He said, you need to do what I have done. I have served. I've come to serve, not to be served.
What gives you hope for the future?
I am someone who's very hopeful for the future, because I believe that, like Pandora, the story of Pandora's box, the box was opened and all these evils came out of in the world. But the one thing that remained was hope. And even in the Bible, in the letter of Corinthians, it says that there are three things remaining: faith, hope, and love. And what gives me hope is that I do believe in humanity, despite the things that we do, such as re-electing Trump. I still believe in the capacity for our species to change and to evolve and to become a better version of ourselves, because ultimately I do believe that we were all created in the image and likeness of God, but we just need to realize our own human dignity. And once we do that, we will stop being such unloving and unkind beings. So I do believe that we have this capacity for change. We just need more and more people to try to make a difference. And it doesn't have to be the small thing. The bishop always says, even if you just give somebody a cup of water, that's a small act. I mean, look at Christianity or any religion for that matter. Or even any movement, like the non-resistance movement, the independence movements across the world. Sometimes it literally only started with one person, persevering. And then other people join that person. Then eventually, they reach critical mass and they create a change. So we need to be the change that we want to see out there, and we should never give up.
I love that. I think especially when people are leaving high control religion, having hope for the future, having a view of the world apart from traditional Catholicism can be a challenge. So I love that model of looking for improvement, looking towards the future, having the idea that you do have a difference. If somebody's who's listening loves what you guys are up to, kind of likes this, they want to keep Catholicism in their life but don't want to have maybe the hierarchical church, how does somebody find a local independent Catholic church, and what is that experience like attending for the first time?
Yeah, so you'll have to do a bit of homework, really. I would suggest, just starting to Google independent Catholic Church near me, but always read up what this group is about, because like I've said, you get all the spectrum. Some of them could be a mixture, very esoteric, very new age, very liberal, some can be run of the mill, even have the Novus Ordo Mass, like we do. We celebrate the Novus Ordo Mass. And then you will get groups that are even more traditional Catholic than others. So that is what, appeals to you. Obviously, you can go to one of those groups, but if you want to go to more, of a group that is less hierarchical, just do your research. And there was also quite a useful book that helped me a lot, The Independent Catholics. And that is a very good place to start to read that book, because it tells you a lot about, all these churches. And just attend Mass and see if that, really gels with you. Because that's what I did, I attended Mass. And what really drew me about the White Robe monks is that, especially the way the bishop, does the Mass, that there's a lot of room for silence and for reflection. Because the first word in the rule of St. Benedict is ausculta, which means listen. So to allow space to just listen to that inner quiet voice, And for somebody who grew up as Pentecostal, where every little second was filled with noise and music, if I, with all respect, if I now have to listen to charismatic or Pentecostal service, I kind of get freaked out. I'm so used to having space for quiet contemplation. But I know that's not for everybody. But like Jesus said, come and see. The invitation is to come and see. So go and join a Mass and see if that appeals to you.
I just did, while you were talking, a quick Google search of independent Catholic churches in Denver, and there's 5 or 6 different groups. And I haven't investigated any of them, but I guess these are more common than I ever knew, so that's awesome.
Yeah, like I think one of it is the Antiochian Church, if I remember correctly. Many of them will have the name of Old Apostolic Church in there, although they are not technically, part of the Old Apostolic Communion, but a lot of them will have that name in there as well. And then, of course, the White Robe monks also started in America. We have a presence in America as well. And, I had the privilege of also meeting our bishop and our abbot in America, Robert Dittler, as well. He has been to the country a few times. But it can be a bit intimidating trying to find the right niche for yourself. But at the end of the day, it is something that was very enriching in my own life. And I'm really grateful for the community that I found with the White Robe monks.
Well, that's, I've loved hearing about your story, and we'll definitely tell more people kind of about that independent movement. I guess the last thing to fill out here, if you want to pray over people that are listening who are wanting to stay religious. I know many of the community have left altogether, but for those that are listening and want to stay in touch with their spirituality, if you want to offer a quick prayer as we end the episode here.
Yes, absolutely. So I thought about it, and I really would like to share with all of you. Basically, one of the prayers that we do just before the prayer after communion, and we call it the song in praise of compassion. So may all beings be happy and at their ease. May they be joyous and live in safety. All beings, whether weak or strong, omitting none, in high, middle, or low realms of existence, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far away, born or to be born. May all beings be happy and at their ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none by anger or ill will wish harm to another. Even as a mother watches over and protects her child, her only child, so with boundless mind should one cherish all living beings, radiating friendliness over the entire world, above, below, and all around, without limits. So let all people cultivate a boundless goodwill towards the entire world, uncramped, free from enmity. Thus do we praise God through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Well, thank you for being on the show. And if people want to reach out to you or talk to you directly, do you have any social media or website or contact that people can talk to you on?
Yes. So I'm still working on the website, but at this stage I do have a Facebook page for my chapel. It's the Chapel of St. Patrick.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed this time.